Hey everybody, how you doing? I know we're more excited to see Danny than that, for me. Don't worry about it, but can we give Danny a bigger round of applause than that? Nice to see you all. So we're about to get to Danny in just a little bit, and for those of you that haven't met him or don't read him, you are in for a real treat. Danny is really one of the foremost experts and thinkers about everything search, what's going on in the tech space related to search marketing, any trends that are going on in Google. He puts on one of the most important conferences called Search Marketing Expo, SMX, SMX Advanced. These are held all throughout the country multiple times a year. They bring out thousands of people to talk about topics related to SEO and search marketing, buying traffic. Basically, how do we build an audience to grow our businesses? And I think he's just a fantastic thought leader and an even better guy. One of the things we want to do is say thank you for coming out to everybody here. And we've been getting better about planning our calendar. So if you grab the sheet that you see over here, we're trying to make sure that we've got a full calendar lined up for all of next year. We have some really big guests that we're planning for. Barry Diller from IAC, Reid Hoffman from LinkedIn, Ben Horowitz from Andreessen Horowitz, Ariana Huffington. So we're lining up all these speakers for next year. For the rest of this year, we've got a great calendar. In October, we've got David Hornick, who's one of the most well-known and famous VCs in the Bay Area at August Capital. And he's going to be talking about the multi-million-dollar deals they're doing and what's going on from a VC trends perspective. We got that event on October 9th. You can sign up for it right now. You can see the URL and get the slot because that will definitely be a packed, sold-out event. And then we wanted to get your help and feedback. We have launched at DocStock something totally new, which is a series of video business courses to help you start and grow a business. So you can see there's a URL right here, premium.docstock.com/courses. This is a totally new product line for us. And what I wanted to do is try to get some of your feedback on what we can do to help make it better. Because just by a show of hands, how many of you right now are either running or planning to start your own business in the next 6 months? Great, so probably at least half the room. We designed these courses specifically for you on topics like how to raise money, how to start a business, how to get customers, and we're really trying to just make these as valuable as possible. So we're going to give you full access to the 25 courses that we have completely for free, and all we ask that you do in return is tweet this out. Check out the new @DocStock business video courses, premium.docstock.com/courses. If you tweet that out, we're going to follow up with you tomorrow on Twitter. We're going to get your email, and then we're going to send you a code so that you get a full month's free to DocStock, no credit card needed, nothing, and you're going to get access to all of our courses 100% for free. And then all we want to know from you is what can we do to make these courses better. So for example, how many of you have ever taken a course online, just by show of hands, related anything to business? Cool. And just yell out, for those, keep your hands up for a second. What did you take a course about? Just yell it out. Finance? What's specific about finance? Investing, sales. What kind of sales course did you take?
Sales methodology.
Sales methodology. What else?
Email marketing.
Email marketing. What courses would you like to see? If you could have a 4-hour course taught by the biggest expert on any particular topic, what would you love to have a course about that would help you in your businesses?
SEO.
I like that. SEO. We got a good expert here tonight. What else? Yeah.
Business contracts.
Business contracts. Cool. What else?
Taxes.
Taxes. All right. We're taking notes on all this stuff, by the way. What specifically about taxes? All right. Have any of you ever had any questions about intellectual property and what to do for your business related to IP? Yeah? Nima, stand up. Nima just shot an amazing 3-hour course with us. We got to know him because he's been coming to our events for the last 2 years. We did a partnership together. He came on as one of our experts, and we're going to be releasing his IP course in attorney practicing how long now?
5 years, which in tech years is about 20 years.
That's 20 years. And has this amazing product that he produces called Clean Sell 2. So he's an entrepreneur as well. So you can all check out the course that he's doing. If any of you are interested in working with us and developing courses for entrepreneurs and partnering us, we're paying folks for this, doing all sorts of partnerships. You can come find Mike in the back over here and Kava and Thel. Guys, raise your hand. These are our course expert team over there at DocStock, our director of content, our content specialist, and Mike's our COO heading up this effort. So we'd love to get your feedback. And again, if you could just take a moment and tweet out, check out the new @DocStock business video courses, and then add in that URL, Laurel. Where are you at? I think Laurel just stepped outside for a second. But Laurel's going to follow up with you tomorrow from the @DocStock account. And we're going to get your email, and we're going to set you up with a completely free month to DocStock. You might even be able to negotiate with her and get a couple more months than 1 month free. I'm sure you could sweet talk her. You guys are all good negotiators. And we really just want to know from you what we can do to make these courses better so that it's a product that could help thousands and hopefully millions of people. Does that sound like a fair deal? Cool. Love it. All right. Now that we got through that, please join me in welcoming Danny Sullivan, founder of Search Engine Land.
Thank you.
So I gave you a little bit of prep on how we typically do this stuff. Really, this is a fireside chat, Danny. And my goal is to make sure, like, if you and I were just having a drink at a bar and chatting about everything about our lives and what's going on in the tech industry and other people were listening in, we want to have that level of, like, intimacy and engagement and interest. And so we typically have the conversations in three parts. One, I want to get to know about you and your history and what led you to doing the things that you're doing. The second is, what overall trends are happening in search and search marketing that are important about the industry. And then third, you saw we have at least about half the room that are entrepreneurs. So what are the things, the specific things they need to know about SEO, about search trends, about what Google's doing, about Panda, about search marketing that are going to help them grow their businesses. And then we'll open up for audience Q&A, and then we'll all have some food and drinks together. Sound like a good deal?
That sounds great.
Cool. So just tell everybody about yourself. What do you do, and how did you kind of get to the point where you're at right now?
Sure. Gosh, where to begin?
Well, what's Search Engine Land?
Search Engine Land is a publication that covers everything that has to do with search. So both information for people who want to learn how to search the web better, and also people who are search marketers or that are interested in search marketing. So you're trying to understand how to be found on the search engines themselves.
When did you start Search Engine Land?
Search Engine Land started in, end of 2006, I believe it was. Might have been end of 2007, I can't remember. For me, it all started because I had come out of being a newspaper journalist. I used to work for the LA Times and for the Orange County Register, and had left that in '95, went off and started doing web.
What were you covering? Was it business or?
I was doing, I was a graphics reporter. So I worked on informational graphics, and you would have the artist that would go out and do the illustrations, and I would go out and gather the information and do interviews, just like a regular reporter would, but then we would tell the story visually. So I was infographics before infographics were big, or hated as they're becoming now, but we would do some really good stuff. So.
And had you worked in journalism for a long time? Was that your background, or had you kind of jumped around careers?
No, that was my background. I mean, I had come out of college, and I went, come out of college, I went straight over to the Los Angeles Times.
You're from California?
Yeah. So I grew up in Orange County. I live in Newport Beach now, so greetings from behind the orange curtain. We come in peace. I had grown up there and went to work for the local edition of the paper that was down there. Had started off as an editorial researcher. Did this weird thing of jumping ship from the LA Times to the Orange County Register because they actually had a reporting position, and if you were involved with graphics, that was the place to be.
Were you technically oriented as the internet was just getting popular and things like Prodigy and AOL were coming out? Did you jump on those trends?
I jumped on those trends and then got the hell out of newspapers because of them. I was involved with doing a lot of what we called computer-aided reporting at the time. Now we just call it reporting, but PCs were coming into the newsrooms. People weren't using things like spreadsheets much. They were trying to figure out what they should do with these things, and I was very involved with using the computers a lot and trying to get people involved with it and churning up charts and doing that thing. I mean, if I had to produce a graphic, a lot of time I was having to churn the numbers, which was bringing me back into using the computer a lot. And when the web came along around '94, the people were trying to figure out what to do with it in the newspaper industry, and I distinctly remember having seen the web and then going to a meeting in the paper at the time where we were debating, gosh, should we get going with Prodigy, or should we get going with AOL, or should we get going with CompuServe? And I just thought, I got to get out of here, because I didn't think any of those were going to be the future. I thought the future was going to be the web, and in fact, I wanted to be involved with helping develop the web.
And you were at the newspaper until 2006?
No, I was at the paper until '95. Left in '95 and went to work on a startup to get people online and with their own websites in Orange County. It was called Maximized Online back then. A friend of mine had a software company called Maximized Software, and he started this online division. And I did an excellent job of helping him drive that into the ground.
That was your very first kind of entrepreneurial venture.
It was, and what we had assumed was that nobody would want to spend much money on a website because it's tight. So we thought we'd go after local businesses. So we put together a package where, $200, we build you a web page, we get you listed in the search engines, we get you all this online publicity, and quickly discovered.
That was a big thing in the late 90s, getting listed in the search engine.
Well, it was, and that's what led to search engine land today. But we quickly discovered that the small people that we were targeting towards didn't even want to spend that amount of money, and then we were getting approached by large companies who did want to help it, but the sales cycle was a lot longer. And by the time we got ourselves reoriented or pivoted, as we'd call it now, he really wanted to focus on the software side. Mm-hmm. But as part of that, in doing all this, people wanted to be listed in search engines. It's 95. And so the idea was, I don't know, you fill out this form. Like for a search engine like Galaxy, if you remember it at the time, it was actually a directory, and it was a 3-page, 100-question form, what category you wanted to be in, what thing you want to be here, and so, all sorts of stuff. And at the same time—
How many people remember Galaxy?
Yeah, you shouldn't remember it. A number you will probably remember Lycos, though. And you would go over there, you'd submit your page, and you were told you were supposed to put meta tags on it, and that would help or whatever. And I really wanted to understand more because we had one client who came in who was like very upset that he was not ranking #1 for the words Orange County. Like of all the things, even then, that could be there, he should have been #1. And I didn't really have good answers to give to him. So I started looking at what was going on with the search engines over a course of a month. I literally would take out my log files, go through, understand when they came to spite of the page, how long it took for those changes to show up in the search engines. Discovered things like some of them hadn't come back, like ever. And you realize very quickly, well, then you're not very fresh, you're out of date. Realize things like the title tags, which were really crucially important. And the meta keywords tag really didn't have anything to do with it.
What I may do here, because I'm sure there's some folks here that are beginners SEO, is we throw out terms.
Yeah.
Let's take a moment to define it. So
if there's terms I think you should know, I'll let you know. But yeah. The title tag is a good one. Every web page has an official title, which is resident in what's called the HTML title tag. And you recognize this when you do a search on Google because you see the title of the listing. That's usually coming from what's called the HTML title tag.
In the result.
In the result.
There's something dash.
Exactly. Or when you go to, if you're in your browser and if you're on a web page and you sometimes see reflected the name of the web page, and it's showing up in your tab or whatever, that's coming from your HTML title tag. And that back then was one of the key things that search engines used to decide if you should rank better for a particular word. I mean, it made a lot of sense, right? If you were using these words to describe your web page as the title, it's kind of like a book being about something. And that still holds true today, by the way. It's one of the things that's kind of carried on. But in the end, I looked at all these different things, and I published a guide that was called A Webmaster's Guide to Search Engines, because I really wanted people who are building websites to understand what these search engines wanted from you. Not to trick them, just so that you understood things like, at the time, frames was a mechanism that were becoming very popular, and nobody really does that now, and so I won't go into it, but it was a bad thing when it came to search engines. Or people would create pages that were all in images, and the search engines, if you can't highlight, copy, and paste text off a web page, then they can't really read anything. And so I published all this stuff out there, and right around the time the company closed down.
This is late 90s?
This was 1996, actually. And so the company closed down. I went out on my own as a consultant and just started working at doing the occasional consulting job, the occasional freelancing job, and writing job about search engines. Suddenly I was getting approached, can you write a story about search engines and how they work? And maintaining this guide for people to learn more about how search engines operate.
Were you charging for the guide or just giving it out for free?
At first it was for free, and then I got so tired of people just stealing it that I put it behind a paywall. I had asked people to do free donations, nobody did that, so I put the main portion of the guide back and was surprised that suddenly people were like, wow, okay, I'm gonna sign up for it. And I had a lot of free information as well that I provided. And by the middle of 1997, that was ticking along well enough that I could do that full time. And I rebranded all of that at the time into something that was called Search Engine Watch, because I wanted to give it a name that was about search engines and distinct from me being a consultant. And so I did that, really from 96 all the ways up through 2006. But at the end of 97...
Were you actually doing SEO consulting? Would you go into companies and help them?
And I would do that, and I'd have a client that would occasionally approach me or whatever, and I would do some of that as well. And so there was always a bit of that, although I started phasing that out around 1999 because you run into a couple conflicts. As things developed, First of all, I'm going in and talking with the search engines, and they're giving me sometimes off-the-record confidential information on how they're operating. So you don't want to go into a situation like that and then make them think, oh, your job is to, you're asking me all these questions just so you can do stuff better for your clients.
Yeah.
The other thing is, as things started to develop, I was having to cover other SEO firms. So it really didn't feel comfortable to be out there as a consultant and, with an ongoing thing, plus the time that goes into it.
It seemed like you were
as
more
well.
of a journalist at heart anyway than wanting to be like this great SEO consultant.
Right. So, it'd be nice to do them both. But it really was, there was enough going on there, and I really did enjoy the journalism aspect of it.
And there's this, and we'll get to this as we get to the conference, but there's this whole world of SEOs, right? There were all these folks that you came up with in the late 90s that go to conferences and meet each other and work on company literally. And a lot of these folks are the people that are at your conference religiously now at every conference.
Right.
Greg Bozer and Gray Wolf and all these folks.
Well, and in fact, so what happened was by the end of '97, I was approached by a company called Internet.com, and they asked to buy the Search Engine Watch site. And that sounded great to me. So sold the site and continued to work for them under contract. And in 1999, we jointly started producing this conference series. It was called Search Engine Strategies, or SES. All these initials and names will change shortly, and I'll explain why. But that ticked along all the ways until about 2006. And then the conferences, as you mentioned, the first one we ever did in 1999, really was an incredible experience because there had been all these people who were involved in search marketing who only knew themselves through mailing lists. They only knew themselves through, that's how we didn't have Twitter, so we were like mailing with each other back and forth, and everybody would be on a common mailing list or whatever. And so I can remember the first time we did the event, we had people come out and kind of like, are you, approaching or whatever, and this sort of in-person community formed. The other great thing, which always kind of warms my heart when it happened too, but people used to be very fearful of Yahoo, not Google. Google didn't even really sort of exist so much in 1990. It was growing or whatever, but it was really Yahoo that people had problems with because it was the biggest search engine. It was dependent on you being listed by having them accept your listing. First of all, a human editor had to approve it. And then, really, if you were going to rank, it was going to be off whatever the title was that they put for your name in the little card catalog they had and the 25-word or so description. And sometimes you would be really careful, submit all this stuff, and they would change everything around and you wouldn't get found. And so I managed to get somebody from Yahoo to come out and talk. We did these panels at the end of the day, and I was really afraid of what was going to happen with the Yahoo speaker because there were a lot of people really upset with Yahoo at the time. And so we took the first question. I was like, oh, what's going to happen here? And the person stood up and he said, I just want to say, first of all, thank you for being here. We're trying to do this work. We're not trying to mess with things, and this really gives us a huge degree of respect, and we really appreciate being out there. And I was like, oh, okay, everybody hug, and But it was nice, and it was like really the first time that people who are involved in the search marketing space got to meet and interact with people from the search engines who sometimes people want to characterize them as natural enemies. I don't. I think that they can work together and do well with it. But to sort of wrap up that story, so these conferences developed. 2005, the thing that I've been involved with, the Search Engine Watch and the Search Engine Strategies, they all get sold to another company called Incisive Media that wanted to be in that space. So they said, great, we're going to buy all this stuff. And so they acquired those brands and then had like a...
So you pretty much working as an employee at that point?
No, I was still a contractor.
Okay.
And I didn't have a contract to stay, and that was part of the whole thing about them wanting me to stay, and I didn't, in the end, feel like it made sense for me to stay. And they certainly didn't feel like it made sense for me to stay with them. So I went off and basically went back to doing exactly what I was doing before, which was to start a site called Search Engine Land to cover all the stuff about search engines. And we started our own conference series called Search Marketing Expo, or SMX.
So just because
So they all continue from what I was doing. I just sort of changed names from where I was at.
So certainly you were an authority at that time. A lot of people knew you. But you built this publication out of nothing. What did you do to popularize that? Because you, by all accounts, you have the most popular publication now for everything related to search, and you're regularly in Tech Meme, and I think it's really considered one of the foremost leading. Just in general, kind of as people think of tech and business blogs, you fall in that category now. While it started as something relatively niche, what did you do to build up that followership and audience early on? And how are you supporting yourself when you were doing this publication that really wasn't making much money at first?
Well, in the first, it was really the first year, and what I was doing was just trying to cover this space in a fair and factual manner. I wasn't trying to hype up things that didn't make sense. I was trying to get people answers where they could have answers. I was trying to foster the communication that was going out there, and really working hard at it. I mean, I just have really high standards, and so I was trying to do this really in-depth kind of reporting.
Was there anything from a marketing standpoint you did to help get the word out about Search Engine Land when it first launched?
When Search Engine Land started, by that point we had some nice channels in that we had things like, Twitter was already out there.
Were you getting like front page digs, anything like that? Was that
occasionally? Dig was never that happy with search marketing sites.
Yeah.
So by the time I started up Search Engine Land, one thing that helped was I'd already had a personal following that developed up. Yeah. So I had people who would be following me, say on Twitter, that I could say I'm on this new place. I had a mailing list of people who were already coming to my own personal blog, and people would follow my RSS feed, and fortunately there was a good number of people who followed over and picked up with it from there, and that gave us definitely a good jump start. But then we still had to go back and build things out and help people discover us, and it was really for us a lot of just the work that we were putting into it. We weren't spending on advertising to try to pull people in. It was really the organic efforts. Some people like to term it the inbound marketing efforts, but it was really that we've got this great content, we've got social media channels to try to put that out there, so make sure our content is available to everybody who wants it, so that they want it in RSS, or they want it off of Twitter or Facebook.
And how many unique visitors do you get a month now?
Okay, I gotta think about that on top of my head. It can be anywhere between, say, 600,000 to upward to 1 million. Depending on
probably a lot of page views per session. And
yeah, it's roughly double, that goes with it from those sorts of figures with it from there.
Okay. So you started off the publication, and then you went back. When did you start doing the SMX conferences?
We started those up in 2007. So Search Engine Land started end of 2006, like the last month, and then our first conference happened 6 months later. And they go together with themselves as well. The SMX is really sort of Search Engine Land brought to life. Rather than us writing an article, we'll try to do the article in the form of a panel. We'll put together different people and have them kind of tell a story about what's going on in a particular space.
Okay. So let's fast forward today. What topics for those folks? Well, how many people have been to Search Engine Land before and read it? Got it.
Thank you.
It looks like you're going to get a lot of new readers starting today.
That'll be great too.
Talk about what topics you mostly cover and write about, because the scope has really changed, at least from my standpoint, since I started reading it, in 2007. What are the main topics that you cover on Search Engine Land, and then talk a little bit about what you do with the conferences?
Sure. So Search Engine Land will cover anything that's related to search, and there needs to be some search component to it. And actually, we started an additional site called Marketing Land at the end of last year so that we could go a bit broader into some other areas of online marketing. But they didn't have to have that search component. But we really want Search Engine Land to be focused about search because there's so much to talk about there. And we'll cover everything from SEO things that are happening through PPC or SEM, as sometimes people are calling it. We will touch a lot on social to the degree that social is having a huge impact on search that's going on with it as well. And then things that are related to how consumers can learn to search better as well, we'll pick up on. The things that we don't tend to cover are, business search products. Like I want to make my company website more searchable. Yeah. It's a bit hard to do that. We don't spend a lot of time trying to do product reviews of different SEO tools or things that are out there because it's hard to do that if you're not actively using them, and there's so many tools. What we, I think, especially try to excel at is there's a new Google launch or a new development, or there's some new trend that's happening, and we try to explain to you what's going on with that. With our news coverage, and then we have, I think, about 15 different columns in areas that range from video search all the ways up to like local search. And we have practitioners who are in the trenches talking about what they're seeing going on in those particular areas and trying to give you good tactical advice.
Got it. So let's jump into the Google stuff, because it seems like one of the areas that you cover most is what's going on with Google, their trends. Often one of the keynote speakers at your conferences is a mutual friend of ours, Matt Cutts, who kind of is in charge of all the quality for the Google search engines. Over the last over the last 2 years, it seems like Google's made a very conscious effort to purposely try to improve their search algorithm to get better quality content. And it's kind of stirred up the pot, right? A lot of sites that were getting a lot of traffic like ours at some point took a hit, and they're coming back. A lot of other sites got wiped off the map. Most notable is this Panda update. Why, first off, from your standpoint, why is Google so focused on changing the results that have been showing up historically over the last couple of years? Is it because there's more competition? Is it because people have different expectations? And do you think the changes that they've been making are actually leading to better results?
Well, last year at the beginning of the year, it was a fairly extraordinary time when in January of 2011 you had a post that came out saying Google's results suck. And suddenly, among the tech bloggers or whatever, everybody's like agreeing, yeah, they're totally horrible, they're totally horrible. And I think what was happening is it was coinciding with this sort of growth of content farms or helpful, I would say helpful information, but people who are producing content specifically to search terms.
Yeah, a lot of people have figured out how to produce content specifically to get ranked.
And so I think what was happening is with certain people, it's not like this content didn't necessarily exist before, nor was it all necessarily bad, but now it was becoming very branded. So if you were constantly seeing content from an eHow or an about.com coming up, and if you had a bad experience with that, at least you had a brand that you were going to attach to it, and this new concept that you were going to attach to it, and then you decided to take it out on Google. And it really was this cry, like, you got to get rid of this stuff. And it was starting to hurt Google because they had Bing coming along and trying to ramp up more. You also had Bleco start up and talking about it, and it looked like people were like saying,
so Bleco's a new search engine that is trying to really, it cuts out a lot of sites and is trying to really maintain quality standards.
And one of their pitches was we're going to be the spam-free search engine. And so you had in some people's minds that Google's results were really bad. They weren't necessarily really bad. We literally don't know if Google's results have gotten worse or better over time because there's no independent metrics that you can point to. Right?
What's your feeling about it? I mean, is your personal intuition that the search results are getting better or getting worse?
They're probably about the same, I'd say.
Okay.
They're
do you think people's expectations?
They're hugely there's all sorts of things going with it. They're hugely better than they were 10 years ago. And in fact, when you talk about expectations, we do searches today that we might not have even thought of doing a few years ago because we just wouldn't have thought the information was out there.
What would be an example of that?
You can search for any kind of computer problem. You'll probably get an answer to it. Interestingly, some of these, how do I do this, how do I do that kind of queries, those kinds of things come up with it. You can just throw an address into a search box and know that you'll probably get information about the address. Yeah. Or that you'll click and you'll get directions to it.
Do you see it as a net positive for the end consumer that Google now focuses so much on their own products that when you do a business listing, they put it in there, when you do a product listing, that they put it in there? I mean, Google's really becoming, in many more ways, a content company, right? They bought Zagat. They bought the company that's doing the information on flight listings. And a lot of people are up in arms. I hear a common complaint that Google's preferencing their own stuff. And I always say, well, why shouldn't they? They're not meant to be objective. They're meant to give you the best subjective results, and then it's up to the consumer whether they like it or not. Is that your point of view?
No, well, it's mixed. I'm very nuanced on it, and which would go to yes and no. The stuff that's going on right now where the FTC is doing a review and you have organizations like Fair Search all upset and up in arms where they say Google favors its own stuff is not about Google favoring content. It's about Google running vertical search engines. And that stuff is all absurd.
So can you dive
into that? And I'll explain that. So if you're a search engine, your job is to point people to good information that answers their questions. That's what you should do as a search engine. And as a search engine, if someone does a search for pictures of flowers, you should really be giving them an image search engine that shows them pictures of flowers. Or if somebody is doing a search for, restaurants in Los Angeles, it makes far more sense to be giving them a local search engine that shows actual restaurants put onto a map than 10 web pages that maybe match it. So when we talk about what Google and other search engines are, first of all, they're a horizontal search engine, which means that you can search for news, you can search for local, you can search for video, you can search for shopping stuff, and you're going across a horizontal spectrum of things. But then search engines also there's vertical search engines, which is I'm going to take this slice here of news, and I'm only going to let you search through specific news content. Vertical search engines have been around since before Google. When you would use Alta Vista, they would have an image search engine. And that was the Alta Vista vertical search engine. It was very commonplace, and it was a very good thing for users. And the best example of why you want someone like Google or any search engine to offer vertical search where it makes sense is what happened on 9/11. On 9/11, when you were searching for World Trade Center, the #1 result you were getting on Google was see the view at the top of the World Trade Center, right? It was something similar to that, where you were getting the World Trade Center website because the search results at the time were not updated that quickly. You might update them once every 2 or 3 weeks. So there's this horrible thing going on, and Google finally at one point on the search box basically had to put up a link saying go away and watch TV. Because they didn't have a good news search engine. Other people had news search and it was starting to develop, but they didn't.
And now their new algorithm kind of addresses that, right? It preferences fresh news.
The algorithm addresses it, but more important, they offer Google News. And it makes sense for them to do that because then if there's a breaking news event, when you do a search, because even if they say there's a news thing here, nobody ever pushes on those buttons. We've found this over time. So people do a search and they just expect to get news search results. And that leads to where the conflict comes into place. So when Google starts developing out a local search engine or a shopping search engine, you have other shopping search engines who get upset saying, well, you shouldn't have a shopping search engine, you're competing with us.
Like Yelp, for example.
Yeah, exactly. And it's like, well, it's a good experience for the search engine to be pointing to the end user results. It's kind of like saying, it's really unfair that when I get the Los Angeles Times, they have a sports section from the Los Angeles Times. I really expected that I should get the sports section from, the Orange County Register. It doesn't make any sense because it's not that you're getting favoritism of the sports section. Both sports sections have the same end content information.
So where is Google going wrong in the process? If it's okay for them to rank their business listing above Yelp's, what are they doing that's off base?
Where they go wrong is when they actually start owning destination content. So
they own the content.
And so this is the difference. When you do a local search, until recently, or when you were doing these vertical searches, and Google News is an example, when you do searches there, by and large, you're still leaving Google and you're going off to a news publisher. The key exceptions are like if you get AP content, and that's only because the AP doesn't run a website. So they actually want Google to do that. Where Google starts going wrong is when you do a search and you end up at Google again. So Google Books was a good example, but you could excuse it because you could say, well, unfortunately, it doesn't exist, so the only way you're going to get that content is go to Google Books. YouTube, to some degree at first, was almost an excuse as well, because you would do a search, and the only way you were going to get this video content was if it was actually to be provided as hosting. But as you start getting into these things like, well, now we're going to acquire Frommer's, or we're going to acquire Zagat, part of the reason they're doing it is because of all the anti-competitive concerns on those other things. You had people like Yelp who were upset that Google was giving you a page that was listing all the reviews and linking to the reviews from a Yelp or from other local providers. And they didn't like that. They didn't like it even though they were getting 75% of all their traffic from Google. That still wasn't fair enough, right? That was still, this is the absurd thing.
Well, their point was that Google's taking our intellectual property, our content, our star rating, and they're not as many people are clicking through, so they're not seeing our ads, right? Wasn't that the basic?
Well, their argument was, you're building a local search engine on the back of our reviews, and that's unfair because it's going to cause people not to come to us.
So Google said, F you, we'll just go do it ourselves.
Well, no, I mean, Google in the end said, yes. Well, Google, so first of all, I can't stress this enough. It is a really odd argument to go and say that Google is killing us because we only get 75% of all our traffic from them. It's like CBS saying NBC is killing us because they make 75% of their viewers tune into CBS, right? It's a bizarre argument to make, and they don't hold up when you start going into it. But Google, clearly seeing the writing on the wall, says, okay, if you guys don't want us to use your reviews, and link out to you in the way that we've been doing it, we'll just go out and I guess we'll get our own content. And that's what they've been doing.
I'll tell you what I think frustrates publishers. And the same thing I think when you hear people talk about, you know, a small business owner wants to know that the federal tax policy isn't going to change on them. When you're a publisher and you're used to getting X percentage of your traffic from Google, whatever it is, 10, 20, 30, 40, 90%, if all of a sudden one day that just changes,
right,
you're wondering, well, why did this change? And especially if it's, you know, maybe you can make an excuse if it changed once, but you know, when you're in a position like we're in, I mean, and we talk about it very openly, you know, right before Panda, we reached our peak of 25 million uniques a month. And then after Panda, now we've kind of fluctuated everywhere from 15 million uniques to 25. Now, is it an amazing thing that we're able to build a business that gets 15 million people a month at the minimum that's primarily driven from Google? Of course.
Right.
But is it frustrating as a publisher when you wake up and you don't know whether you're going to get 15 million uniques this month or 25? It's a little maddening.
So you've got two different things going on. So let me go back to the competitive aspect. So as Google has actually been acquiring more and more of these destinations, like a Frommer's, then you really get into these competitive issues, because now it's not a question of, well, we're not listing Yelp's search results. It's that we are a destination as well. And then
do you actually think that's a conflict of interest, though?
Oh yeah, it's definitely a conflict of interest. And it's one that's growing as they acquire more things, because their logic in getting something like a Frommer's was, well, we want to be able to have the best travel information that's out there. And so, you know, we're trying to provide answers. So it's like, well, what if you decide that you need to have the best news information out there and you decide you need to acquire the New York Times? How does that, what does that do to the dynamics for a Washington Post or Wall Street Journal?
And what do you think of, you know, Plus, for example? Like, I from my perspective, I haven't seen yet social making search better. Bing's doing commercials about it. Google tries to push every freaking, like they want, you know, they're trying to push images of people I supposedly am friends with on Plus into my results. From your perspective, has Plus or has any social in search really made it better from the user yet, or is it just window dressing at this point?
It's a little better in some ways, and it's a whole lot of experimentation.
What's better for you? What do you like? What from Facebook or Twitter or Plus do you like seeing in your core search experience?
First of all, one of the best ways that it improves the experience is for one of the best ways that people judge a search engine, which is eco searching, right? How's the search engine's relevancy? People type in their own names, they expect to see their own content showing up. Mm-hmm. Google Plus is brilliant at that. You sign up for Google Plus, Google will make all your own content rank well for you. And if you don't realize that they're doing it for you, you know, rock on.
So real quick, let's
but I mean, it's how they do it, right?
Let's talk about this for 1 second, because this is something I don't think really most people realize. If you're logged into Google, they're giving you very tailored results now.
Yes.
The results that you, if you and I were to run the same exact search, and we're both logged into Google, which is I think 35% of people now that are on Google are logged in, right? Because they're in Google Drive and, you know, any Google product analytics, Google Plus. And we do the same query, you know, if you search for DocSoc and I search for DocSoc, we're going to get different results.
Yes, and
a lot of people don't realize
in fact, even if you're not logged in on Google and on Bing, there's an excellent chance you're going to get different results from other people. First of all, the geography plays an important role, even not logged in. So my results that I search for down in Newport Beach are going to be different than the results you search for in Santa Monica. There'll probably be 1 or 2 results that are different. Secondly, even not logged in, we're being cookied by both of those search engines, and they're matching it to your browser, and they're building up a search history back 90 to 180 days. And that search history will influence what you're searching for.
And do you think that's good?
And if you ever want to see that in action, by the way, search for a country, then search for travel, and look at the results you get. And the results will be travel results tailored oftentimes to the country you searched for.
Do you think that's good, or you find it creepy, or a little bit of both?
It's mostly good. You know, I lived in England for years, and if you are searching for football over there, you do not want stuff about NFL, right? Mm-hmm. And the geographic tailoring that goes on is a big helpful way in doing that. It potentially gets more to the creepy, but not necessarily if they are seeing what your previous queries are and they're refining it and bringing it out that way. Sometimes it is more helpful where it makes those kinds of changes. If they can understand the kinds of content that you like and the kind of websites that you like, you know, potentially you can improve the information that way as well, and that could be useful too. So there's the potential for creepy. There's also the potential for what Eli Pariser calls the filter bubble. But, you know,
So what else is Google doing that like maybe the average consumer or entrepreneur or publisher doesn't know about? What things have they got going on that people should be aware about?
they kill kittens. It's not constantly. Every time you do a search, a kitten dies.
Yeah.
So you should not. No, they don't. But you could tweet that. I don't care. Just say it was a joke. They on the search pages that we're talking about, they're taking in the things that we just covered are probably the most significant things that people don't understand are happening. And that you're using your personal search history even if you're not logged in, and if you are logged in, they're picking that up as well. And again, Bing is doing the same thing. So that's both of them that's happening. Beyond that,
do you see Bing as a meaningful competitor over a long time? When you use do you ever use Bing to get results that you don't find as valuable on Google?
Yes.
What are those examples?
Examples.
Well, let's pause a second.
Yeah.
You think about it. How many folks here use Bing for even 10% of your searches? Cool. And just yell it out. What do you like better about Bing?
Bing it on.
Say it louder.
Actually, Bing did this thing called the Bing it on.
Uh-huh.
I've tested it with 10 people.
What's Bing it on?
It's a blind test that was Google versus Bing. I've tested it with 10 people, and all 10 got Bing as better search results.
All right, Bing it on. What else? What else do you guys like about Bing?
I think their image search is a little nicer.
Yeah, their image search. I've heard a lot of people say. I've kind of found it to be true.
The key thing. The key thing tends not to be that the features are that different. It's that search engines have what I call their own voice. So it's like you can get two movie critics. One likes the movie, the other one doesn't like the movie because they have their own opinions. The algorithms are not exactly the same. The collection of documents are not exactly the same. So there was one example, and I can't think of the exact what it was, but I was searching for something on Google, and I couldn't find it. I did the search on Bing, and their own voice brought the result up that I was looking for, and it was successful on it. Now, there's other cases where I could do the search on Bing, and it goes the other way. But that's the nice thing is, first of all, you have an alternative voice you can use, and some people might like that voice better. Then the individual features that you can get and go with it. But it's absolutely competitive with Google. I spent a week where I switched over to Bing, just, this is what I'm going to use. Did not feel like I was having a problem. What I felt like was always in the back of my mind that I wanted to run back to Google, right? Because I thought, oh, is that right? Am I missing something? And occasionally I would do that. And as I got comfortable with it, at the end of the week, I forgot what search engine I was using because I wasn't seeing the logo. And you'd scroll through it or whatever, and I'd realize, oh, I did this. And so it's perfectly good search engine.
Do you think in the next 5 years, Bing's the bigger threat to Google or Facebook? I mean, at the Disrupt conference, Mark Zuckerberg was talking, and he kind of said as a side, like, we do 1 billion searches a day, and we don't even pay attention to it.
Yeah. And it shows.
Yeah. But if Facebook got really serious about search, it seems like there's a certain type, like I wouldn't think to start looking for a person on Google. I would start looking for a person on Facebook or on LinkedIn.
And so I think he got ahead of himself in what he was talking about. He spent some time explaining that the search engines are trying to give you direct answers, which really gets into, say, maybe recommendations. And his example, he said, so if you want to go to a place for sushi, we could perhaps suggest that for you better. And in fact, they perhaps could do that. And if you really want to see that happening now, use Foursquare. Because Foursquare is uncanny in how I can fire it up and I can be in a place, not even doing a search, I'm just opening it up and it's showing me things that are popular in that area based on either people who are my friends or the collective wisdom of what they've sort of gathered. So Facebook could do that sort of stuff if they wanted to. They just haven't got to doing it, and I think that's really what he was talking about. I don't expect that they're going to launch a Google-like search engine, and even if they did, I think they would find it really difficult.
I think a lot of people are, and tell me your thoughts on this, I think a lot of people are prematurely saying, search is dead, and what I mean by that is the following, is there's just, because in the last 2 years, a lot of publishers have had their businesses disrupted on Google. A lot of people don't feel, and it's so much harder to build a large search-based business today, right? If you're going to go out and raise venture capital to say that you're going to do it on the back of Google, it just makes it a lot harder.
Right.
But people are saying, look, we're doing Facebook authentication, we're doing, LinkedIn, we're getting traffic through Twitter. But one of the things that I just find still is that the intention on, and we talk this all the time at DocSoc, the intention on Facebook and Twitter is just so different. When we buy traffic there, when we see how people are searching it, and those users come to our site, the time on page is less. They for sure buy less products from us. You know, when somebody's searching for a word and a query, there's just so much intention around an action to do something around that. And it's not like search is going anywhere. Are people missing the boat by maybe now ignoring search as a way to build their businesses and focusing too much on social?
There's a lot wrapped up in that question. First of all, I think that plenty of businesses get huge amounts of traffic from search for free and is still incredibly viable. And there was a post about 2 years ago, I think it was Chris Dixon who may have said, we're telling startups don't depend on search.
Yeah.
It's like, well, first of all, the startup should have been told never to depend on search, right? You don't build your business around one particular way of getting traffic unless you're paying for it and you can afford to pay for it, right?
And even then it comes to risks, right?
Right.
Prices change.
Prices and go on with it there, but you're going to have some more consistency unless you're just horrible in some ways. So this is a constant loop that goes on with search. In the days when we were dealing with Excite, they would change their algorithms and lots of people would lose traffic. What you never hear about is, for all the people who lost traffic, there are people who gain. The people who gain never complain. They never do. So all you tend to hear is Google's killing all these businesses. What you never hear is Google actually benefited a whole bunch of other businesses. The only reason it doesn't work out that way is in the cases where it turns out that maybe Google itself benefited. And when YouTube did better after Panda,
traffic, exactly.
then there was people like, well, that's going on. But still, for all the people who got hit by Panda, there were a ton of people who did better off of it. And may have had good content and may have gotten rewarded. And you can argue perhaps should have been rewarded more.
Did it go up, down?
It's been the same. We've just come through it. It hasn't had an impact on us.
It seemed like what Google did with Panda is it redistributed traffic from these large sites that did a good job at getting these long tail queries to just a lot more different sites. And I noticed they started giving a lot more ranking to sites that their URL had something to do with a topic, and not always for honestly better results.
And so you'd asked me earlier, are things better or worse? I can't say whether or not things are better or worse. There was one study that was done that concluded that they're doing a much better job on the content farms. I didn't find it that convincing. I did a piece where I said that, look, you know, the thing is that because there's a focus on, I call it the focus on first, do any search you want, and I can find a search result that you did that is absolutely not the that shouldn't be in the top 10 things of all the things you could have shown me. Sometimes it's embarrassing. But because you're getting...
Real quick on that, about 80% of traffic goes to first three results, right? If you're trying to rank for a term, right? Unless you're in those top 3 results.
Which is why Google and Bing can both get away with having substandard search results, because you get 1 or 2 that's bad, but you're getting plenty of other ones that are good. So, you know, here you go, and they can make these changes, they can kind of come through it okay. But then to come back to what you were saying, so you shouldn't absolutely depend on search, but absolutely should you not ignore it. It should be part of anything that you're doing, because it is the most powerful online advertising, if not the most powerful advertising or marketing mechanism that's out there. It is hard to come up with an equivalent form that matches. The closest thing you have are the yellow pages, right? Which were purely commercial. And that goes to the intent differences that you're discovering. Because when someone does a search, they're ready to buy. Or they're researching and getting into it, but they have an actual intent. And that's, whereas when you're coming in off of, say, social...
Well, they're about that subject, right? If you search for, you know, baseball bats, you have some intention about baseball bats. Learn about it, to buy one. If you see an offer for baseball bats on Facebook, you weren't thinking about it probably but for the moment before you saw the ad.
And one metaphor I used to try to use to explain it is I refer to search as a reverse broadcasting mechanism. So if you know television broadcast and television ads, and the mechanism there is, I want to sell this car, therefore I'm going to run a lot of expensive ads to broadcast my message that you should buy this car to an incredibly large audience in almost a shotgun approach of hope hitting the tiny few number of people I can do. And the best way I'm going to narrow it is I'm going to get some demographics that are still largely guessed at about a particular TV show and assume that if I'm hitting the right demographics, they're really going to want to buy that Jetta.
So is in your
And
opinion,
in contrast with search, it's a reverse broadcasting system. Instead of you going out there and broadcasting a desire to people, people are broadcasting their desire to marketers. They're typing exactly what they want into a search box to win. All you have to do is listening, and the listening form is really showing up in response to those searches.
So in a couple minutes, let's get to some more specific practical advice on search and search marketing to help them to help everybody here build up their audiences. Just one or two more trend questions. In the next 5, Google's what, 70% of the search market right now?
In the US, yeah, about that.
In the US. In the next 5 years, will anyone seriously challenge Google in that percentage? And if so, where is it going to come from?
The federal government. It's complicated. Bing's share will probably grow, but not at the expense of Google, at the expense of Yahoo. Unless Marissa Mayer, who's suddenly become a wild card, really changes things up. But even then, she's still got a big challenge to do that.
And they have also multi-deal lock here, and it's not.
Yes, but there's tensions going on with it because it hasn't been producing all the money for Yahoo as it was supposed to. Yeah. But I mean, what we've seen over time is as Bing's grown, it has climbed out of like single-digit percentage to where it's coming up on 20%, and it's taken that away from Yahoo. Google's been kind of pretty much unchanged. Mm-hmm. I think that, you know, it's hard to say 5 years from now when you go out on a limb, but I would still expect Google to have the majority of search traffic that's out there. I wouldn't be surprised if it maybe grew a little bit, but I could also see that maybe Bing does manage to pull some of it away, and maybe we get into a 60% share that's happening with it. But what the joke I was making about the federal government is that where they've been most successful is building up this idea to the degree that we had to have a FTC investigation of whether or not Google is so dominant in search with its monopoly, and it has an admitted monopoly. Eric Schmidt said in the hearings, yes, we have a monopoly in search. If that needs to be curbed, and if so, how do you do it? Because it's not illegal to have a monopoly; it's illegal to abuse your monopoly.
Well, the one thing I always wonder about that is, you know, when you would buy a computer and Windows was just installed on it, you never had any choice over that. Mm-hmm. You choose every day, dozens of times a day, what search engine to go to. There's nothing that's forcing you to go to Google. So I don't.
That's Eric Schmidt's argument.
I don't completely buy.
We're a thing away. Have you ever smoked?
Ever smoked a cigarette or pot?
Cigarette. We'll go with cigarette. Keep on thinking.
Actually, I have not smoked one of the two, and you might be surprised which one it is. I have not smoked a cigarette, no.
All right. Any cigarette smokers out there? Or former cigarette smokers? Anybody find it hard to quit? See, you can quit.
Is the analogy quitting cigarette? Is quitting smoking, or is the analogy which brand?
The analogy is it's a habit, and that there are any number of habits you can get into that are difficult to break. So yes, you could quit smoking at any time, and yes, you can go out and run a mile a day any day you want to get into better shape, and yes, you can lose 5 pounds whenever you want, but you don't because you've got habits that you're into. And Google is a habit, and that was my joke about cigarettes. I said, Google's a habit like cigarette smoking is a habit, but it's one that doesn't kill you. There's no Surgeon General warning saying you can't use Google because it's bad for you, because it's not bad for you. It does a great job for you all the time. So when you are in that habit of using
it kind of feels like we're saying they're monopoly just because no one can do anything better than them, so I have to use them.
Well, no. They're monopoly because of their market share. And you have a certain degree of market share, and you can be declared to being having it. And so, but the challenge in getting people to use the challenge is there's no reason for people who are happy with Google to leave them. They're in the habit of using Google and they like it. So why would they want to quit? And the other thing I try to liken it to is, perhaps a better example is, you all have a best friend? Everybody has a best friend? I assume you all have a best friend out there, right?
This is a very geeky crowd here. I mean, okay. I think we're hoping to make some connections.
I think you need to get some friends. But if I bring a stranger up to you and I say, this stranger would like to be your best friend, you're probably going to be like, I got a best friend. I don't need to get a new best friend. You tell things to a search engine that you would not even tell your best friend, right? You do. You search for things, and you're constantly talking to this search engine and confessing and saying all these things to it. And, hey, can you tell me what I should get something to eat? Hey, can you tell me what this sore is? Hey, do you think I should, you're telling all this stuff, and you're telling it all to Google all the time. And Google's giving you really good best friend advice back all the time. Now here comes along Bing, wants to be your best friend. You're like, I got a best friend, it's been working fine for me. That's the challenge. That's why when you talk about with your search engine and your computer, you're right. You don't, your computers these days and your phones and everything, they do have defaults.
Yeah.
And the defaults are largely controlled by the deals that are being cut by the search engines. But even if you change the default through a deal and you shove Bing in front of somebody, people who have the Google habit want to change back.
Yeah.
That's what happened with a lot of BlackBerry owners who were on Verizon. Verizon cut a deal with Bing to make Bing the default on a lot of devices. They changed it up on BlackBerries, and then the BlackBerry people went berserk, and they said, how do I change this thing back to Google? So that's the challenge, and that's going to be interesting to see what comes out of this investigation, because it's unclear, like, what do you do? Do you insist that people? It's even a bigger issue in the EU, where Google has a 90% or more share. Is the EU going to demand that people not use Google? Or if you try to go to Google, will 1 out of every 5 people be turned away? I don't know.
So last question before we jump into, let's get into some practical nuts and bolts advice. What are some interesting places that you go now to search? I find myself a lot these days searching on Twitter. I think there's really fascinating information to find through there. I find myself searching a lot on LinkedIn. I use a lot of the news products that I think people don't use. I use a lot of the verticalized searches. Where are some of the places online? I used to love searching on Technorati before they completely screwed it up.
Yeah.
For informations on blogs. I thought it was the absolute best way to target information just specific in blogs. I think Quora is an amazing place to search. Where are you going for interesting specialized search queries that have nothing to do with Google whatsoever? What are some interesting pockets for the folks here?
Well, actually, I tend to do a lot of my searches on Google, but that's mainly because I'll drag out certain. I know how to tailor a query to get to the specialized information.
What's an example of that?
I can do site-specific searches.
So site
colon, whatever site I'm trying to look for that way, so I turn it into a vertical search. A lot of times I'll think about the word somebody might have been using that I'm trying to go after. If I'm trying to go after computer information, I might think about how they might have written it or put in additional terms. The things that I found interesting, I really have discovered Hipmunk, which was a really fun flight search tool that's out there.
Hipmunk's a way to
right.
check for all your travel, and the layout that they do was really different and better to help you do it.
I love reading Tech Meme just to find out what's going on in technology news, but it has a search interface, and the search interface is just brilliant if you want to go through and try to find tech coverage on a particular topic. If you want to know what happened on iPhone Day last year, you can go over there, you do the search for iPhone 4S or whatever, and you get all the main headlines that have come along with all the sub-headlines that are associated with that. And I think that is just really, really powerful.
Do you do much search in Twitter yet?
Yeah, I do, especially anytime there's an earthquake, right? Was it a quake or not? I do searches on Twitter. I also tap into Topsy, because Topsy will let you go deeper into Twitter than Twitter will, sadly, because Twitter only goes back about 6 days. Yeah. And Topsy is their preferred search partner. And so if I need to pull out information from Twitter in the path, I can go over to it that way as well.
Cool, that's helpful. All right, so let's jump in. One of the things, again, by show of hands, how many of you are running or about to start your own business? All right, so
Don't start a search engine.
Unless you can get it bought, then
yeah.
God bless. A big question is, well, how do I get to my first 1,000 visitors, customers? What are some of the recommendations you have, both between search, and we haven't talked much about search marketing. At your conference, you literally have some of the biggest experts. I mean, if you were in their shoes, launch a new business, knowing what you know about search and search marketing, what would you do? And also, I think one thing that's really helpful is how can the folks here spot and know who's a good SEO expert and who's someone that can actually help them make money on Facebook and LinkedIn, instead of just someone that's going around town saying, well, I'm a social media expert, work with me.
Did you ever see that social media guru cartoon? It was great. You should look it up. It's just like, I am a social media guru. You are so lucky to have me. It goes on like that. Can we afford to pay you? You cannot afford to pay me enough. I'll try to find it later. I'm sure someone will find it, but it is just great.
How would you get to your first 1,000 customers using search and search marketing?
Blog. So I would have a product first of all, have a great product, okay? That would be really, really useful. Assuming I have a great product, I would put up the website with all the key stuff that you need to know about that product. Lots of rich content. Well, I would be building the website in Flash. I'd be building it in good HTML5, good copy and paste text that I could do it using images where it makes sense. And I would make sure that that site meets all the basic SEO best practices, which is, can a search engine get in there, find the pages? And this is stuff that really ought to be second nature to designers. It's not, but it ought to be.
There's a very good SEO course on DocStock, which you're all going to get for free.
There you go. So check that out. Or you can search for SEO, and I think we come up for SEO, and we have a whole guide of pages you can look at, and we have a little video that explains a lot of stuff. But that's, first of all, what I would do. Secondly...
Also, Aaron Wall's book is still probably, to me, the best overall primer, right?
You can get...
Search SEO book? Just, it's called SEO book.
Yes, he's got, and I'm not sure if he maintains the actual book anymore, but he certainly has community forums and everything. But if you had to start with anything that was free that you wanted to get, Google publishes its own guide. And some people would debate whether or not, well, they're only going to tell you this or that. It's the starting point.
Yeah.
You should at least know what they say before you then want to go on to figure out what else to go with it. And what they say is basic stuff.
So you're talking about blogging as a way to get
So I would get a blog going, and I would be looking for interesting content, particularly content that might go viral that I can go with it. So one example, and this might not be so much of a startup, but we had this one woman at a conference that we did, and she's like, well, you know, what can I do? I sell signs, right? It's all she does, she sells signs, right? And we're looking at it like going, this is awesome. You sell like radioactivity warning signs. You sell those signs of people falling over. I mean, you've got stats on the most popular signs that get sold and what people do with them and where they go and most unusual locations. And this is all awesome stuff to go out into a blog post, you know, that you could constantly be doing. We had another person who's like, oh, we rent cars. It's like, well, what's the weirdest thing left behind in a rental car? What's the worst rental car that's ever been damaged? What are the rental car renting tips that you can... I mean, that is all good content. And so it's getting from having a product to being a voice or having content that goes beyond your product being more than just sort of a brochure type of thing. And so from the blog, all other good things can then flow. The blog can feed into, you're building up your Twitter account, you're sharing stuff off of Twitter, you're building up your Facebook account. Now you have content that goes out onto Facebook, or you're building up your Google Plus account.
You personally have like 61,000 followers, or is it more, like 120,000? How many followers? 120,000, right?
On something Twitter. Like that. It's
For @Danny Sullivan.
It's more than that, but yeah.
It's a lot. What is it? How many followers do you
have? It's like 260.
You have 260,000 followers.
But I'm a suggested user on Twitter, so I get a lot of people who follow me. I mean, it's nice, but then some of them aren't real.
Got it.
So the 120 figure is probably better.
Well, you got 260,000 followers on Twitter. That's pretty impressive.
But there's a lot, yeah.
When you send out a typical tweet, how many retweets and favorites do you get on it?
Billions. No. It depends. It's bizarre what people retweet sometimes. Like I was going through security and said, oh, can't we figure out a better way to do our security lines? That's like 10 retweets or whatever. Yeah. And anywhere from 10 to 50 is typical, depending on what it is and what I put out there and how popular it is.
What do you? I follow you, so I mean, you tend to tweet a lot about like what's going on in the news and your thoughts on the topic. Do you ever tweet about the personal stuff? I don't see it as much from you. You're only one of like 50 people I follow.
Because you're not tuned in on the weekends, so. I mean, during the day, after I've had a few drinks, then they really start picking up. Yeah, no, I tweet personal things all the time. I love to do that. I was, God, was it over the weekend? We were out, and in Newport, sea lions take over boats. Right, you know, they see a boat, they all jump on the boat, and then suddenly you have 20 sea lions on a boat, and then they start sinking them. And so we were going past, and there was a whole bunch of them were out there, so I was tweeting like, "Here's the sea lions going up there," or other things like that.
Other than being a suggested user on Twitter, which is quite hard to get these days, I don't know if they still do it. What would you say are the 3 most important things for folks to build up their Twitter followers? How could somebody get to their first 1,000, first 5,000 Twitter followers in the fastest way possible?
Well, the easy way would be to go follow 1,000 people, because then you get 1,000 people who start to say, "Oh, I'll follow you back," and you kind of go with it from there.
Do you find that people are still doing that?
Oh, yeah.
Still follow back
yeah,
it's
still going on, and now it's more automated. You just go out and buy it. Yeah. And in fact, you had a comedian in the New York Times who's profiled about how he just went out and bought followers.
When people buy followers, do you find that for the most part they're real people?
I'm not suggesting you do that, by the way, but I don't know. I mean, they're real people.
Are they? Or are they just fake accounts that people have created?
No. Some of them are actual real people who are just getting paid to follow, right? You know, and somebody's going to charge you $1 a follower, and they'll pay somebody else 10 cents a follower. But that's not to me is not an actual earned person. It's more valuable if you've got somebody who's really important to follow you. So, if I were trying to grow it from scratch, I would first of all spend some time getting to know it. Getting to know the social medium that I'm going to be interacting with and understanding what's going on. Then, if I'm producing content, I would be sharing it so that people can follow me, and that's sort of that one-way mechanism that's going with it. And then I would be interacting with key people that I think I want to be noticed by. So if you're in a particular area and you see that you can contribute to something, I'd be calling out the different people, and I wouldn't be doing it in an annoying fashion, and I wouldn't hammer them over and over. But
well, I think
if there's something
that people miss. All right, for example, if I talk about this a lot, like if like one of the ways that we're right now getting our big guests is we just reach out to them on Twitter. And maybe 1 out of 10 people respond. So, for example,
well, next year is like awesome, that lineup you've got out there.
Well, you're leading the way, Danny. But you know,
as
like,
I go, Barry Diller follows.
My guess is if anyone in this room just somehow got your cell phone number and called you, unsolicitedly, you're not going to call anybody back, right? Most likely not.
Oh, I probably should answer because nobody ever calls me on my phone.
But
this thing takes phone calls.
But I always say it's like if you saw that somebody had retweeted you over the course of a month 5 times and said positive things about you, and then over Twitter just simply asked you a question, you probably have a pretty high likelihood that you'll respond to them. I respond to maybe 1/100th of my unsolicited emails, and I respond to maybe 75% of my unsolicited Twitters, just because it's kind of new and there's not as much of it.
I mean, I'll get, you know, for me, I'll have various people who are responding back to me or whatever, and it does stand out when somebody's responded with something that's intelligent or made a comment or, you know, whatever they wanted to do. And sometimes you can tell, okay, they may be trying to get noticed or whatever. But the things that have really stood out for me is when someone has responded with something that I learned off of. Like I tweet something about, like I was at the Microsoft Surface event and I said something about a tablet and somebody responded back to me, well, actually it's this other thing. And I was like, wow. I didn't know that, and I'm going to want to know more things like that from this person. And I go back and I look at the things that they've tweeted and I understand, right, this is somebody that's worth following. And that's where I want to pick up with it from there. And then, you know, if I'm seeing something, I love to retweet things that I'm hearing from other people if it's something interesting or unique or whatever. So that's one of the things that I would be doing out there to do it. Of course, I would have my Twitter account out on my blog, and I would be putting stuff out that way as well.
Are you finding, quick switch of topic, and then we're going to open up to audience questions. So Laurel, if we could get the microphones, and if someone else from DocSoc could help her out, just so we can get both sides of the room. Are you finding yet that people are really successful at making money by advertising on Facebook and Twitter? And if so, what are those examples and how are they doing it?
You know, I haven't seen people saying, yes, I've made money off of this. Like, I put this into it and I came back of it. Yeah. There's certainly been case studies that have come out where people are succeeding with it. I think the fact that people are doing Facebook advertising tells you that people are making money. We had GM come through and say, we're not going to do it anymore. That seemed to be much more the exception than the rule.
Well, that was also brand advertising. It's not like they're trying to sell a car on Facebook advertising, right? You know, but let me push back on that. Are people really, because you know these are performance marketers. If it's not working, they're going to leave after a period of time. That's pretty clear. But is it that they're really making that much money, or just that Google's got so competitive that we're all? I mean, you know, as we buy traffic to validate courses, you know, it can be $3, $4, $5, $6 a click. You know, when you're selling to a subscription service for $19.95, it's hard to make that up. Right. And you go over to Facebook and Twitter. Like, for example, right now I'm testing out the Twitter ads account, and I'm getting clicks at 33 cents. You know, which is great. You're not going to find that on Google anywhere, but the conversions are just so low. And even when we do these events, you'll see Twitter drives the most traffic into our Eventbrite page, but it's 1/100th of the signups that you get off of our own email list or Google.
But see, then those things may go together too. It may be that you're building up the branding on a Facebook or a Twitter, which will in turn translate into somebody having done a Google search and maybe not even clicking on your ad, just trying to find you that way. Yeah. So I don't know that there's a single one-size-fits-all type of thing. I think clearly people are finding Facebook advertising to be successful because their revenues are growing, and you don't grow the revenues unless you're not offering a product that people are finding valuable. When I have talked to people in the past, it has been very much that we're trying to find budget to put into that as well as put it into Google. What they're certainly not doing is trying to rob from Google and put it into Facebook. They tend to seem to be trying to rob from other areas. So, but I think the core to all this is, the answer is going to be what you discover through your own testing. You should experiment with all these different things, understand what your conversions are, and then go with the stuff that's working for you.
Last question, then we're going to open it up. Can you just talk for a moment about your conferences and who makes it? The conferences are relatively expensive to go to, but if you're in the field of a practitioner of SEO, if you're in the field of trying to drive traffic to your website or e-commerce site through Facebook, Twitter, Google, I'd say there's the single best conferences. Who here should be attending those conferences, and when's the next one that you got coming up?
You should all come. But seriously, if you're involved in any way,
I said this to you before. It's the single best run conference, and there's probably only 3 tech conferences I really care about going, and yours is one of those 3.
Well, it's great to hear. So that makes me very happy. And Akvila is busy tweeting away, I'm sure. Akvila does all of our tweets for Search Marketing Expo. She's our community person there. Quite seriously, if you're involved with marketing, I'd really recommend you come out to either an SMX East or West. The next one is SMX East, which is our New York show, and it's in October. And it's like our supermarket show, all aspects of search marketing, including what we call a boot camp track, which is getting you up to speed. For the West Coast one, that's next March, I think it is, and so it's easier if you're in this area to go out to that sort of thing.
And folks can also apply to be speakers, right? If
sure.
They're as a topic,
and we'd love it. We love getting
Where do they go to apply to be speakers?
There's a page on the site where you can, when we open it up, we take those calls. But either of those shows are good things to go to if you're getting new to search marketing, because they'll get you up to speed, and they'll give you a whole range of things that you can learn about. And even if search marketing is not your key thing, you're going to come away with stuff to get a better. It's the main way people are finding information online. So you really owe it to yourself to understand it. And if you don't even make it out to a conference, at least learn a little bit about it. Because when you build that stuff into the foundation of your company, not just the website, but everything that you do, you don't end up with names that are unsearchable, with a pi symbol in them or something. It makes a difference. In Las Vegas, in December, our search marketing, our SMX social media show is coming up. And that's one that's close to home that I'd really recommend everybody check out, because it's really going to be very tactical stuff on how you can make use of social media and tap into it to bring you back some direct traffic and conversions and stuff with things from there. And then if you're experienced in search marketing and you know the ropes, that's what our SMX Advanced show is in Seattle, and it's the one that sells out every year and sells out. Like last time we sold out, I think 6 weeks prior to the event.
And your keynotes are typically like Amit from Google, who is in charge of, and Matt Cutts.
Matt would be the keynote that we usually have out at Advance. And
but you also have Ballmer at a lot of your...
We had him, well, I'd love to have him in all, but we had him at our West show about 2 years ago. And what I try to do on the bigger shows is if I can get one of the main search engine speakers to come out, like we had Susan Wojcicki from Google come out and talk, is I really like to get the executives out there so people can hear from them directly. I think that it says a lot for the search engine to send a top-ranking executive out, because they're getting in front of an audience that is their customers, and not necessarily getting in front of their customers in a controlled little setting where it's like the Google's own conference or something like that. And I think it's important. I think it says a lot to the people who are paying ultimately for that search engine to exist.
All right, so let's open up to some questions. Just show of hands. Laurel will come around with the mic. Please introduce yourself, what company you're with, and I will reserve the right to veto any stupid question, as I always do. Let's go ahead.
Alexander Stigers from Dun & Bradstreet Credibility Corp. We're based in Malibu, pretty local here. Thank you for being here. It's an amazing honor to see you here locally in town. I had a question. I know you mentioned before as one of the highlights about mobile search, and we didn't touch that subject, but I was wondering, the tactics you mentioned before as far as geo-targeted search and optimized content, are the same principles applied for mobile? And what we should do beyond apps as far as making sure we get found in mobile search?
So mobile search by and large is about the same. We have a mobile search column on Search Engine Land. I'd highly recommend you read it and go through some of the archives. We just had an article that talked about some of the differences that come up. But it's really not a case where you didn't have the mobile site, you didn't have all this. You're going to probably do all right. The things that seem much more important to pay attention to with mobile is the landing page experience. I have this great chart that I love, and it's Valentine's Day search activity from Google. And it shows the searches happening on desktop and the searches happening on mobile, and they're going along like this. And it starts at like 9 a.m. And then you can see it like, like 11, it just spikes out of control on mobile, and it just goes insane up like this. It comes down. And what's happening, of course, is all the guys have just realized that they either didn't book a restaurant or they didn't order any flowers, and they're out and about, and they're like, oh my God, what can I do on this phone? And what can I make happen? You know, can this magic device dig me out of this hole? The charts are just fascinating. I love them. Not that I've ever been there, but anyway. So and so you can see that people are really using their phone. And then there's another chart that I usually go with this, and it shows the abandonment rate. When you're on a desktop or a tablet, when you get into a cart situation, abandonment's about the same. When you get into mobile, it's like twice as much, and that's really because it's a much smaller screen. So I think what you need to think about in mobile is when someone comes to you, how friendly are you to them with the mobile landing page? Because if you're not, you're much higher expectations in that sort of regard. I think the apps are also important because people are, of course, turning to the App Store to see if they can find answers to things in the way that they turn to search engines. So if you can provide an app that matches something, then potentially you become an answer through the app. So I think that's something to pay attention to. And then the nice thing is once you get somebody to subscribe, if you will, to your app, that's almost like yet another form of social media marketing or another kind of marketing outlet too.
Okay. Next question, over on the side.
Hi, my name is Aaron Davis. I own a small marketing firm here in town called Business Frame. And 2 questions. How are links affecting search right now? And what are some things that a small business might be looking for in an agency when they're thinking about hiring them?
So links are one of the most important things that you can have to do well. And this goes to what you were asking about social. The search engines originally started using them as votes, really picked up when Google came along in 1998. And so you can think of every link you get pointing to you as a vote. And it's not exactly like that because they also look at the words that are in or around the link to understand the context.
And also the quality of the site.
And the quality of the site. That's why when you search for books, you get Amazon, because a lot of people link to Amazon with the word books, and they're reputable people. You search for cars, not a lot of people link to Amazon with the word cars in the link, so it doesn't trump everything. But the problem with the reputation is now, it started off as votes, and everybody knows you could never buy or sell or fake votes, right? In the real world, that would never happen. And so what has happened, people who do go out there and they buy links, and they have all sorts of things to go there. So the search engines keep constantly trying to figure out, how do we still make using these links to get the relevance that we used to get out of them? And I think that it's becoming harder and harder for them to do that. And that's where the social signals come in.
And they're relying on other signals now. Human signals.
They rely on other things, but really it's still the link signal is very strong. And I think what will happen is the social signal will start to come up and be used more and more heavily, but they're still not there yet. They're still doing lots of experimentation. So yes, the links are important. That goes back to why if you can have good content or you have a blog, that's a way of producing those sorts of links if it starts going viral, getting shared. That's also why social media, those are links that you're sharing, and some of those links will come back and help you. And the other part of it was
how to
signals about an SEO company or marketing.
Oh yeah, so signals on whether or not you're dealing with a good SEO company. You'd asked that earlier before. First of all, check references. It's not any different than anything else you do if you're hiring a plumber, and someone's recommended.
So who for your money are and granted, I know these folks probably work with larger companies and cost a lot, but who are the 3 or 4 best SEOs for your money?
Oh, I can't say that.
Because they're all speak at your conference.
And I can't say that because it depends on the kind of company you are too, right? I can take a single independent person, and they might be the perfect person for a small business that has a small budget, who really wants somebody who knows what they're doing and isn't going to charge them an arm and a leg for it. And then I can take somebody else who's a big company and say that small person is totally wrong for you, because as a big company, you're going to have them in 10 times a month just to do client management, just to do presentations and all this stuff that they haven't built their systems around. And so they're not actually charging you enough money to make up for the time they're going to put into it. I would say that, yes, we try to have people who speak at our conferences that we obviously think have something to share. That is not a recommendation that they are the best SEOs in the world. Because we can't do that kind of. We can talk to about why we thought they were really good for a particular panel, but it's a starting point.
But yeah, I'll definitely say the vote. If you want to know folks that are good and reputable in the SEO community, go to the SMX conference, look at the panel, the speakers in each of the areas, and I do think that's a really good representation of people that do know SEO well, who are reputable, who do know search, who do know social, and those are good starting points to follow them on Twitter, look at their blogs, reach out to them.
But get those references. Talk to, if you can get people to recommend them to you, that's a good place. But if you are talking to some of those SEOs, then you want to ask them for some of the references that they talk to. I always like the one advice where somebody says get 3 references and then ask for 3 more. Because everybody always has 3 good references apparently, so getting the additional ones is harder. But they should be able to provide you people, and not references like, well, here, do a search for this word, see how well that person's ranking. You want to actually talk to somebody from another company who can tell you why that they seem to be a good match. The other thing is, kind of what I hinted at before, you want to find a company that matches the kind of company that you are. So if you go to a really high-priced SEO firm, they may be high-priced because they're dealing with companies that are expecting a lot more that comes off of what goes into it. That's a big debate that can go on too, is you can get sometimes an SEO will say, well, they're charging 10 times more what they should be charging. And it's like saying one lawyer charges 10 times more what another lawyer charges. It depends on a lot of factors that go into it.
Got it. All right, let's take another question. Brian, can we get him over here?
Thank you. Brian Deegan, Investors Business Daily. A startup company could have a company website, and they could also have a blog site. You seem to suggest that the blog site is the way to go. Why am I right on that? And why is that? And secondly, what's the best way to seed articles to get them picked up elsewhere?
So the reason I was suggesting the blog was that if you were starting up from scratch, if you're starting up from scratch as a company, and depending on your product, probably, let's say it's a single product, there's not a whole lot of content you have at that point, right? I could probably do your company website. I've got 10 pages, I'm done. A year from now, if you're a successful company, your product's been developed, you've got lots of testimonials, you have lots of ways it's being used, maybe you can add more into the company website. But that's why I suggest the blog, because it's a way for you to start producing content. The blog can be part of the company website. It can be within the same domain, it can be a part of it as well. It's just an opportunity of producing additional content that goes beyond just the product pages themselves. If you're a big company with lots of content, lots of products, those product pages are really, really valuable, and you should certainly be developing up them as well. And then as for getting articles seeded, you mean news articles?
Well, if you're going to write a blog post,
okay.
You want to get that out there. How do you get that out there?
So if you do your own blog post, one way of getting it out there is that you're starting to build up your social media, and that you're sharing it out that way. And what you're hoping is that your followers are starting to pass that on to their followers and so on. Like if you built up your Facebook page and you share something from your blog to your Facebook page, that's going to circulate out not just to the people who follow you, but to some of their friends. And so hopefully you're compelling enough that you're going to get some natural rise in that over time. Now, to get beyond that, you might go through and look at the idea of doing some guest posts or guest blogging on other publications. And what you want to be doing is looking for places that have an audience that makes sense for you to be doing these articles with. What you don't want to do is, there are a lot of places that simply exist to take in guest blog posts. And they'll pitch themselves like, hey, we take anybody's stuff, and this will help you better with search engine rankings. That's always your big warning sign. Anything that says you're going to do better with search engines ought to start sending up all the red flags for you. If that's the purpose of the website. It's a little bit different if you're actually going out to use a tool. Like if you're actually you're looking at an SEO tool, you would expect the SEO tool to tell you it's going to help you do better. That makes sense. But if you're going to a website that tells you, our website is about getting you better rankings by guest blog posts, they're probably not going to get you better rankings by guest blog posts, because they don't actually have an audience there to read the posts. What they really do is have a mechanism of just taking a lot of posts. that are like that. So, you know, Huffington Post, pretty easy to become a guest blogger over there, and you can start getting into that kind of audience that goes with it. I would look for those kinds of opportunities where there's a real audience of people out there who may want to pick up the content that you're sharing.
So I think what we'll do is we're going to break in a moment. Whatever individual questions you've got for Danny, you get a chance to ask him here. And really, I just wanted to say thank you so much. One, because you're someone that I have respected and looked up to on the topic of everything related to search. I think it's clear that you eat, breathe, and sleep this. You love it. You're passionate about it. I think you've always had the best intentions. And in talking about putting out a great product, I think your website, Search Engine Land, and your SMX conferences are just fantastic. So I encourage all of you to check out searchengineland.com, SMX conferences. Hopefully you'll see these faces there. And please, everybody, join me in thanking Danny so much for coming out here.
Thank you.